So the backstory here is that while reassembling the RGD radio after a relatively simple repair, I managed to stick my soldering iron through the middle of the tuning cord, which was a pretty dim thing to do and is now causing me a lot of extra pain and work. So the thing about this is you can't just use any old cord for this. You need to get the proper tuning cord, which I have got some. You can't use straightforward cotton, it'll just snap. You can't use shiny cord because it'll just slip. You have to follow the precise instructions, which fortunately I do have because I have the service manual of how to wind it. And the biggest issue, and the first thing to do is take everything off, so get everything out of the way, all the box and everything, because otherwise you're going to have too much trouble getting into it. You need a completely clear area to work on. And then the next challenge is getting these little bits like the spring and the tuning pointer off the original one when they've had some glue on that's been there for 40 odd years. Normally with glue you can use alcohol to get rid of it. The problem is the alcohol also tends to strip the paint off this off the red paint off the tuning needle, so usually heat's a slightly better way to do it, and I managed eventually to get the remaining string and glue off both the end spring and the pointer. Now, I won't subject you to those struggles and the swearing that took place during them. So we're almost in a position now. I've taken this off here, but I can't see a way to get the middle bit out, but maybe that's just how it is, because there's something here, but it looks obviously it's riveted to the board. I had to take these screws out to get the pointer off, but now I'm not sure if I can get the whole thing off in order to make it slightly easier to wind it. So the news is that the scale was actually just glued on to this rubber thing here, so that came off quite easily. So I'll just put that aside somewhere, and so now we can see the whole mechanism and wind stuff around it. Now what we actually have is the instructions for this. So this is from the manual, and you can see they've drawn how to wind the thing on. There's this bit here where it says tuning gang fully opened. Now what that means is the capacitor has to be completely open. So the capacitor is actually this thing that turns here. So the tuning cord and the pulleys and everything have got two functions. One is to move the needle around the scale so you can see what station you're on, and the other is to turn this tuning capacitor. Now the tuning capacitor doesn't have very much lock to lock, as it were, and if you actually have to just directly move that, it will be very sensitive and very difficult to tune. So this also gears it down so that you make a lot of turns of this to make this turn not very much. This is a variable capacitor. On some of the older sets you can see it quite easily, and you can see whether the vanes are open, which is a low capacitance end, or closed, which is what that thing's talking about. On this it's not so easy because it's all enclosed, so I can't see whether the vanes are open or not. So I should probably have done this before I took it apart, but the way I think of it is you have to see it as where is the high frequency end. So where is that going to be when we're at the highest frequency? Let's have a look at it here. That's the wrong part of the radio we're looking at there. Let's have a look at it here. So this is the scale, and the high frequency end is up here. So we've got 104 here. We've got all the high frequencies and the low wavelengths, which correspond to the same thing, are all up this end. So what I'm looking for is what position of this will have the tuner move to this end. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to sort of roughly reattach the cord in the way that it's supposed to be. It's still got the little loop at the end, so I'm going to shove that around here, wind it back around this, and according to the thing it goes this way. It will have more turns in the real world, of course, and then it comes no, that's not right, is it? Yes, it is. It goes round here this way, back across round here, and then winds back round the tuning control. So if I turn this, which way does that go, right? And you can see as I turn this to this end, this goes this way, right? You can see that rotating. You possibly can't see it quite. Yeah, there you go. Whereas if I go back to the other end, if I had maintained the tension, which I didn't, just put that back. So as I move the thing in this direction, the wheel moves this way, the tuning capacitor wheel moves this way, right? So if you think about it, moving it this direction, I'd expect it to be moving this way, and I know this is a high frequency end, and if that's the high frequency end, that means that when this is fully anti-clockwise, it's when the tuning gang is open, right? They could have just said fully anti-clockwise, but you know. Now here's another interesting thing. I had the manual for this actual radio, the RGD 155. We now have also the manual for the Colster Brandes equivalent, and that's actually got a much better diagram here, and also tells me how long to make the cord, which it didn't tell me in the other one. So it says I need 850 millimeters here. That was the other one. I was just sort of having to guess, which isn't that good. And also it's got a slightly better diagram of how it all fits together. Now another thing to note is if you look at the picture here, you can see it's got things where there's like two stepped pulleys where you've got one turn on here and 4.5 turns here. So in order to get the half turn to work, you have to make sure that you've got the this thing here has a little gap in it at one point that you can, I don't know if I can really get you to see that, but there are little gaps in the pulley where you can feed the thing to the next level. There it is, and you have to make sure that aligns in the right direction. Otherwise you're going to be stuck, and you won't be able to put the exact 4.5 turns on it. Your first challenge is to get around this one here, and you've got to note very carefully how the turns go. So this comes out of here. If you start winding in this direction, you've got to keep threading under yourself. So what you actually need to do is to start doing your turns here, but to do that you need to know exactly how long you need here. So going back to the bench, I'm going to put this as far as possible anti-clockwise, like we said. We put the loop on the end of here. It should be easier than this, you'd have thought. Right, loop's on the end of there. It's supposed to go round this, just straight off at the back of this and onto this. Right, but if I have to wind here now 4 turns, I can't wind them on top of one. I have to wind them underneath, because really it's got to come out at the bottom so that it can go onto that next step of the pulley for 1 turn. So I'd have to wind going under each other, and that's a real pain. So what instead we do is we have to just mark a point at which we want this to come out so that we can wind it the other way round. So I want that to emerge around here. So if I put a mark on the cord here at about that point, I should get a bigger pen really, shouldn't I? Been better. It'll be good enough. Then we can wind it from there. Well, it's finally done. Took a lot longer than I bargained for, and I bargained for quite a bit, because these things are always a pain to do. The cord I'm using is a little bit thicker than the cord that was on the original radio, which makes it slightly challenging to get it right number of turns around the pulleys. It's a complex mechanism because it's doing 2 reductions. It's doing a gearing reduction to turn the tuning capacitor here, which is this thing, and then it's doing another gearing reduction to move the pointer. That's why there's these different things, and then there's an essential number of turns you have to have on each one, as we saw in the diagram. And the reason for that is to make sure that it doesn't jump off when it runs, so that it doesn't, before it gets to the end of the thing, it doesn't run out of turns and jump off here. And that also is something that tends to happen because this is a bit thicker. So it's taken me a while to get it all into shape. And of course the final thing, the other thing which is always a bit tricky, is this spring at the end. So the spring is what holds it under tension, and you have to get that distance and pull of that spring, the tension of that spring right. If it's too tight, then the thing won't move properly. If it's too slack, then everything just slips around and it doesn't tune at all. Now, just as a final check before I start putting it back together, see I've got a little bit of blue tack here. And if I wind the thing to the maximum frequency, which is where we started aligning it, I'll just get that in position there. You can see it's just about aligned with that little pad there, just a bit to the right of that little PCB contact pad. So if I then move this all the way over to the lowest frequency, I have to say it's not entirely as smooth as it was, but it's not bad. You can see it stops just after the cutout in the board there. So let's go all the way back again. And yeah, it's back where it was. And back again. Yeah. What I'm checking here is that I haven't got any play or slip in this, because once it's all together it's going to be very difficult to fix that. So just putting that blue tack on does that before I actually try and put the pointer back on and the scale and all the other stuff. But looks like we're on the right track finally. So the foreign-made rebadged Rover is working again after my earlier act of vandalism, and it's really nice sound comes from this actually.
For too much longer, and unfortunately, as it turned out, they happened to turn it on against Posh at Bramwell Lane on
Can't obviously answer for the actual content, but this is one of my favourite radios really. I like the clarity of it, I like the finish of it, I like the sound of it. It's a pity, I mean, I'm so annoyed with myself that I nearly completely killed it, and I'm glad I was able to bring it back to life.